Welcome in everyone to the Bat Flip podcast. Today I am David. This is Matt. Damien is in Bristol, Tennessee, going to watch a NASCAR race. We hope he'll have a fun time, but for now it'll just be me and Matt. Matt, how you doing this week?
Doing pretty good. Just been hanging out, watching a lot of football this weekend and some baseball and a little bit of everything. So definitely been a good weekend, and I hope Damien's having a good time at Bristol. I've been to that NASCAR race several times, and I'd probably still go to it occasionally if they didn't move it to the middle of football season on a Saturday, which is fantastic. Good planning by NASCAR, um, but yeah, it's a good. It's been a good week, and ready to talk a little bit of baseball. We're getting down the stretch here, and a lot of interesting stuff this week. So how's your week been, Damien? David?
And not Damien this time.
Yeah, I'm used to kicking it to Damien, but
Right. Nope, just me. It's been a good solid week here. We got my girlfriend's birthday coming up, so I'm excited for this weekend. Should be a fun time. But other than that, we're watching football on Saturday and racing on Sunday and baseball around all of that. My team, we'll cover it. My team called up their top prospect, so that's been fun to watch and follow, and a little bit stressful because our manager doesn't like to use him. So he's debuting, starting his first game tonight. We'll give you some live updates as they come in if that game starts. But this is it's been a good week. So let's break into the baseball side of things here with the biggest news coming out today. That the Mets have done what we said they were going to do a few months ago. They have finally announced a 5-year contract for David Stearns. I believe he's the president of baseball operations, and they're going to keep Billy Epler as the GM. But yeah, that was announced today.
Yeah, this is an interesting hire for the Mets. David Stearns had been in Milwaukee with the Brewers, and he did a pretty good job. I believe he was originally with the Astros. Um, and it was part of their turnaround. And the Brewers brought him in. He was the guy who executed the trade for Christian Yelich, the Lorenzo Cain signing, and a bunch of good deadline trades, like Mike Moustakas being one that paid off for them pretty well. The Brewers had some really good seasons with him there. They went to the NLCS to 7 games in 2018. And they've done some good stuff. I think that it's kind of hard to tell sometimes with the GM how much how well that they how much influence they had on everything. Sometimes things could easily turn out the other way around or something, but he did a really, really good job with Milwaukee, and you would think he'd probably be pretty successful in New York. He's from Manhattan, so I think he wanted the Mets job, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I'm kind of surprised they retained Billy Epler. I really don't know what they see in him. I mean, he was pretty awful with the Angels, and his job he's done as GM so far with the Mets is pretty awful. But of course, having someone overseeing him, he probably has less. He probably has less oversight over everything and less decision making. So maybe they still like some of the other things he does, but I definitely think this is a good hire for the Mets. Probably the most qualified guy that they could have gotten to run baseball operations, and it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
It's the thing we've been waiting for, right? I mean, David Stearns had stepped down from the Brewers before the start of the season, and kind of all the way this felt was he had been approached by Steve Cohen to be the GM of the Mets. He is on kind of a lame duck contract where the Brewers were not gonna re-sign him after the season, so he was going to be in this kind of GM free agent limbo. But he already kind of had a job lined up to avoid tampering, to avoid being the lame duck, where he was on his way out anyway. So why would he help the Brewers if he was going to join the Mets at the end of the season? He resigned from the Brewers, allowed them to just continue their offseason, and he's going to step in with the Mets. It had to be a year later because of the way the contract worked, but I think that this is a no-brainer move. It was the no-brainer move going in. It's worth noting that David Stearns' manager that he hired at Milwaukee is Craig Counsell, who is also a free agent at the end of the season. His contract is up. and Buck Showalter's currently in place with the Mets. The Mets, obviously, we've discussed it at length. Last place in the NL East, if not fourth place. They've been very, very underwhelming. Buck Showalter's job is not secure in the slightest, and I think it's very possible that Craig Counsell follows David Stearns over to New York from Milwaukee. It seems like this move was kind of a known move for a while, and so there's not much else to say about it. He's going to walk in without Justin Verlander, without Max Scherzer, a couple of pieces that he thought he might have going in. Pete Alonso's on a 1-year contract, and other than that, right, they've got a lot of money wrapped up in guys like Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Francisco Lindor, and Kodai Senga. So there's maybe a limit onto what David Stearns can accomplish in one offseason. And, Max Scherzer at least was told that this team was taking a step back to try to leap forward by 2025, and that would have been when Scherzer was going to leave, so he waived his no-trade clause. I do wonder if Stearns has a different plan, and if the retaining of Billy Epler maybe tries to keep that attitude intact, but we'll see. This is an organization that could make a lot of sell trades in this deadline to try to clear up some money to maybe make a run at Ohtani or do some other things. It'll be real interesting because obviously Steve Cohen is going to be the most active owner. He's going to spend the most money. The question is now, what is David Stearns going to do with that money? He was operating at a very limited budget in Milwaukee, where I think the biggest contract he signed was the Christian Yelich extension. So now he's got Steve Cohen money. What does David Stearns do with that money is the big question. And I don't know. He's generally regarded as one of the better executives in the game. So this could be bad for everybody, but it could be a kind of non-factor move because the Mets might already have a plan based on what they kind of indicated to Max Scherzer.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I agree. I don't know about Craig Counsell. I would be surprised if he left Milwaukee, but who knows? I know Steve Cohen still really likes Buck Showalter, although Buck is up there in age and everything. He might decide I'm not dealing with a rebuild here, which does sound like a likely thing that you see rebuild there for a short rebuild because they can spend so much money. But it really does seem like they're gonna try to they're gonna try to blow it, not necessarily blow it up, but like there was a lot of rumors about them trading Alonso and just kind of trying to reset things a little bit, which they kind of need to do. I mean, it's hard to win with all free agent signings. Like we all want our teams to spend money, of course, but you're signing guys who are on the wrong side of 30, and you're going to have a certain hit and miss rate, even on the top ones. And it's hard to build a deep team full of those guys. So the best way to do it is to build a very good farm system, bring them all up, and then use that money to extend guys and sign them long term. And then you find a guy that you really believe in and supplement it with the free agent market. Just building a team from the free agent market like the Mets have tried to do the last couple of years is just not a great idea. And I think that's probably what they're going to go into. I think that's why they're going to David Stearns now, because he's done this before. He did it in Milwaukee, where they built through some good trades and through their farm system, and now he's going to have extra money to supplement that and to keep guys around. Because part of their problem, I'm sure he was frustrated in Milwaukee when they were making him trade Josh Hader away because they didn't want to pay him, stuff like that. So we'll see what happens, but it's definitely an interesting hire, and it should be a big story.
Yeah, let's take that and go somewhere a little more fun, but in the same vein as kind of a speculative bit of news that came out was that the Angels are going in the wrong direction. Suffice it to say, this is a team that's going to lose Shohei Ohtani at the end of the season, that has waived all their players in what was kind of a white flag waving scenario in the middle of the playoff race in August. This is a team that tried to buy at the deadline, sold off 2 of their top 5 prospects, proceeded to immediately lose the next 10 games. I do wonder, and this is the article that came out, is before even that came out, was what's the availability of some of these guys? What about Mike Trout, right? If Ohtani's gone and they have a ton of money on Trout, how could they even move him, right? He's going to have a no-trade clause. Well, an article, I think, written by Bob Nightingale, which, obviously grain of salt, came out that said the Angels would be open to moving Mike Trout. And if that's the case, who could he even go to that would have some capital, but also be able to provide some prospect return? Because the Angels are going to have to eat that contract to get something back for Mike Trout, so it doesn't look like you traded Mike Trout for nothing. Who do we think could maybe even trade for Mike Trout if the Angels did make him available, like Bob Nightingale said?
I have no idea what a trade could possibly look like for Mike Trout because on one hand he's still a really good player. He was really good in his time this year. There are some signs that some yellow flags about how he's going to age as a player. His strikeout rate has really ballooned over the last couple years, which is a little bit worrisome for a guy who's on the wrong side of 30. Even though he's still been awesome, even with the higher strikeout rate. He's hitting the ball in the air a lot more too, which is he's hitting home runs. But as he continues to age a little bit, how quickly will that power go away? And the fact is that he's all been hurt so much over the last few years. Like you're talking about a guy who, when he's played, has been still a top 2, top 3 player in the game, but he's getting hurt a lot. I mean, he had the calf strain from hell a couple years ago. Or maybe that was last year. And then this year he's had the hamate bone, and I think he also had some kind of little nagging thing early in the season this year. And there's also always been those back things that have popped up with him, talking about him having chronic back problems.
Yep.
So he's definitely a guy who there's a lot of risk involved with Mike Trout at this point, even if you're not paying him a lot. And then that contract is gigantic. I mean, he's owed a ton of money. So it's going to be difficult for the Angels to trade him and get what they would expect in return for a superstar like Mike Trout, because I think that they could pay it down and get something for him, or they could they could probably just trade the contract, and not get a lot for him. One of the two. They're not going to be able to save a lot of money and get prospects back in this deal, though. It's not like in some ways it might be a little bit like. It's not like a Nolan Arenado type thing where, I mean, the Rockies screwed up the package they got back, but they did get back like 4 or 5 prospects. Like, I think that this is a case where you either pay most of the salary and get one prospect, or handing $100 million to another team is difficult. so to take Mike Trout. But if I had to guess on a team that could potentially look for him, I think the Phillies are a team that would probably try to get him. They're very aggressive, and they've run pretty high payrolls. And I think that I don't know, their farm system is pretty bad. They do have maybe I don't even know who they could trade, honestly, because Andrew Painter's out with Tommy John surgery, where he would have been that top prospect guy. And I mean, Mick Abels really struggled at times. So beyond them, there's just not that much there in that farm system. So I don't know what they would be able to do there, but that might be one. They could maybe trade a Mick Abel, who is kind of a good prospect, but has there's some red flags with him throwing strikes and stuff. They could maybe trade him, and Angels could eat a decent amount of contract, and that could end up being something that would work out. And the Phillies do need center field help, because I think tonight they're starting like Ramon Rojas or something in center field. Like, they really need center field help. Of course, Trout probably moves to the corner at some point with his next team. Is probably the best place for him. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm sure everybody would be interested in adding a guy like Mike Trout. It's just working out those details is the big thing. So, and I just don't know. And I don't know what Mike Trout's priorities are. Does he want to stay with the Angels just because he likes it there and he's been there his whole career? I mean, that's possible too. I mean, we've seen that with guys like Joey Votto, who knew the Reds were going to be bad, but he signed that long-term extension and because he likes being in Cincinnati. So, we've seen that kind of thing too. So we'll see what happens here. It's going to be interesting, though.
Yeah, you bring up Philly. Mike Trout is from New Jersey.
That's the main reason I brought up Philly.
Right, and also he's a huge Eagles fan. Well known, highly touted. Everyone kind of figured if Trout ever got to free agency, he would sign in Philly. Obviously, he signed the big $400 million extension to stay in Los Angeles. biggest contract, in baseball history to that point, and still I think to this point. It may be to be surpassed by Ohtani. We'll see. The big question for this potential trade is, does Mike Trout waive the no trade clause? If he does, is he waiving it for anywhere but Philadelphia? We know he likes Philadelphia. Does he waive it for anywhere else? Is there anywhere else that he could even waive it for? I don't know. That's a big question that we'll find out the answer to in the offseason. That's maybe the entire crux of the argument here. But, presuming it's Mike Trout to Philly, I think they have to send back either Castellanos or Schwarber in their full contract just to offset some of the money and give the Angels like a major league piece.
And the fact that that's where Trout would probably play is
right.
It's an outfield and obviously help the defense over those guys too.
Exactly. So, as much as I would want to see, an outfield of Schwarber, Trout, Castellanos at the plate, I just feel like the contract in the outfield, that's just too much money to where just sending one of those guys back does offset that cost a little bit, so you don't have to send $100 million, $150 million into I think it's like 280 that Trout's owed over the next 7 years, something to that effect. So, that way, some of that money can be balanced out. But yeah, I don't know whether this, I don't know if the Angels can pay down enough to get a Mike Trout-esque package, and they won't get it from Philly, like you mentioned. This is that's not a strong farm system, so you wonder. I wonder about a lot of teams, but I don't know that any makes sense that both the prospects, the money, and Mike Trout himself are going to agree.
Yeah, if they paid down like the entire contract basically, which I'd be shocked if they did that, because that is so much money. But I mean, you could open up a lot of those mid-market teams that have really good farm systems right now, teams like the Reds or or the Pirates or something, like where if he's cheap, like money wise, because the Angels paid most of it, like they could give up a ton for him, and it might be their only chance to get this kind of superstar. I could see. I mean, I'd be shocked if Artie Moreno decides he wants to pay that entire contract down, basically.
I would be shocked if Mike Trout said he wants to go to the Pirates.
Right, so. or probably not the Pirates, but maybe the Reds. Like,
even still, man, I can't see Trout accepting.
There's a reason. The Reds are an up and coming team. Is kind of what I'm saying. Like they could win. They could win. Like that's the thing. Like if Trout's priority is, I want to go somewhere I can win. If he goes to the Reds, there's reason to believe the Reds might end up being able to win some. Like, or the Orioles maybe is another one that of course the Orioles are pretty set in the outfield right now, but if you looked at their roster, maybe that's a team that could win if you paid down most of the deal. They've got so many prospects, like that kind of thing. But which that would be an interesting one, because you could always DH one of those, whether it's
you'd think Santander or he goes back to.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I mean they got Santander, Hayes, and Mullins if they're all healthy right now. But you could maybe DH Santander and put Trout in right field or something, like that would work. So, but it'll be interesting to see what happens this offseason, and that's one to probably revisit. I kind of doubt it happens because there's so much money involved there, but that'll be interesting to look at.
It's worth noting that Mike Trout has not played 120 games or had 500 plate appearances since 2019. Hasn't played more than 140 games since 2016. So, that you're paying for high value. It feels similar to like a Tyler Glass now, in terms of who could be traded this offseason, where you've got a guy with a lot of value when he does play, but he doesn't always play.
Yeah, he feels like Byron Buxton a little bit at this point.
Buxton's
been bad this year, but like over the past few years.
Mm-hmm. Like super high value when he does.
Where it's play. Like you get like 4 wins above replacement out of like 70 games, and then he's done.
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's a lot of risk involved, obviously, but it's Mike Trout.
Yeah.
It's a little different than even Buxton or Glasnow or any of those guys.
Well, yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're getting a guaranteed surefire Hall of Famer on your team.
Yeah, he's a superstar.
Selling jerseys, yeah, it's a big deal. So the fact that this is even being mentioned is kind of above our belief system here, but it's worth thinking about. And I'll be shocked if he goes anywhere but Philadelphia. But we'll see what happens. Moving on, Steven Strasburg. We'll touch on this because it's probably still ongoing, but Steven Strasburg's retirement press conference was canceled by the team, and then they said they expected to see Steven Strasburg in spring training. So, I don't know what's going on there, but it's not looking good in terms of how Washington seems to be handling the Strasburg wants to retire. I think they don't want to pay out the whole contract. I think there's probably something to do with the insurance and something to that effect. But this is going to kind of leave a wart on what has been a Washington Hall of Fame level player, and won them the World Series and then kind of fell off the planet.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of this. I mean, obviously, we hear this and it sounds awful of the Nationals. There might be something behind the scenes that's going on here too. I kind of doubt it's something that makes me feel like the Nationals are doing the right thing, but it's there's probably something going on behind the scenes. I understand the Nationals are frustrated. I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that the Nationals are trying to sell the team right now. The Lerner family is trying to sell them, and that amount of money, dead money, is not good for getting money back when you sell. So, trying to get a little bit of that paid down is probably part of the deal here. Which it's unfortunate. I mean, I don't like this at all, though. I mean, Strasburg obviously isn't going to pitch again. Like he's tried twice to come back. He's had thoracic outlet syndrome. He's got nerve damage. He shouldn't even be trying to pitch at this point. Like it's pointless. And I don't even know. Like you're gonna have to pay him anyways. So I mean, let him sit on the 60-day IL until you work something out, I guess. But like I don't. It's just unfortunate that they would. That this can't just be finished because I really hate it. But we'll see what happens. I feel like it probably does end up getting resolved again where they retire him, but we'll see.
Right, and I think it comes. He wants to retire, and I think the team wants to, say, well, you obviously didn't, uphold your end of the 7-year, $240 million bargain. So we want to see, there's got to be some money involved here where the Nationals are probably trying to get a little extra, and if they can't, they're gonna wait on it, maybe give him another shot, see if they can get anything out of this contract. So, moving from there to another injured pitcher who's been with a team for their entire career, German Marquez signed a 2-year, $10 million total dollar extension with $10 million in incentives for this year and next year with the Rockies. So German Marquez staying in Coors, but trying to rebuild some value. He'll be, recovering from Tommy John this year, or the beginning part of this next year. And, I think next offseason he could be a really attractive trade piece if he shows out late in the season next year.
Yeah, it's an interesting move there. German Marquez is a guy who at times has figured out how to pitch in Coors and has put up really good numbers for the Rockies a couple of years. His last year was really, really bad, but a lot of it was kind of Coors induced that last year. Like he just had home run problems. This year, obviously the injury, Tommy John surgery, I think he's going to miss most of next year. So this is kind of one of those deals where I think they're kind of paying a little bit next year, expecting him not to pitch, and maybe getting a little bit of a bargain on a good pitcher coming back and pitching for them year after next. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. German Marquez is really good when he's healthy and he's own. So, and it's hard for Colorado to find pitching. So I don't blame them for signing this, even though, I mean, Colorado doesn't really need to be signing players right now. They need to be figuring out a way to build a farm system. But if you're going to sign somebody, signing a fairly young pitcher that is pretty good and has pitched well for your team to a couple-year extension is a good thing. So,
German Marquez is one of those guys that I'll always wonder whether he's got a little more in the tank. And he'll have to obviously come back and show that he can get to the same levels of fastball velocity where he was like a 96 mile an hour guy plus, the last couple of years, and he's got a very, very good slider. But it's a downward breaking slider, and at altitude, that's not going to break as well. And he's almost just this kind of pitcher that if you saw he was pitching away from Coors, you were like, man, this is a this guy could be really nasty. And if you saw him at Coors, you're like, well, this is like any other guy. I wonder if maybe next offseason, if he shows that he's got the same velocity, if he's got the same break, if a team doesn't take a chance to try to finally get a trade completed for him, especially one of these teams teaching a sweeper, and if you could get German Marquez, with the amount of movement he gets on that vertical slider, if he can't get into the sweeper game and try to find another way to get batters out, because his biggest issue is that while that fastball is really good velocity, the only pitch anybody's sitting on is that slider. So he needs another weapon, I think, to be a really effective guy, and it's so hard to be creating pitching weapons in Coors Field. You either you have what you have, basically, and you're just trying to get outs with those. So we'll see what this yields, but I think it's a decent move for him to go ahead and get out in front of free agency and not try to just go ahead and keep rehabbing. Don't worry about trying to change locations here in the winter.
Yeah.
So let's throw the last one on. Rich Hill got put on waivers today. Potential playoff implications, though probably not. He's been pretty bad this year. He's kind of running on fumes, I think, on the career. But
can he be in a playoff roster? Yeah, I didn't think so.
No. So the teams that are looking for putting him in the playoff race, maybe could pick him up. But Rich Hill could be on his way out, could finally be the swan song for Dick Mountain. Hopefully not, but if the Padres aren't going to keep throwing him out there, I don't know if anybody's going to.
Yeah, I mean, I could see maybe a team that's on the periphery trying to get into the playoffs, like the Reds, who just badly need pitchers who are still alive. Maybe look at him, but because to be honest, he's been horrible, but he might be still better than some of the guys the Reds are running out there.
Right.
But I don't really expect anybody to pick him up. It seems just kind of like the Padres have somebody else they want to get the starts right now, and that they don't really have room for him. So, but I would one other team a few other teams that could maybe look at Rich Hill, or teams like the Braves, the Dodgers, some of these really, really good teams who have had number 5 starter concerns. Maybe bring him in just to help the rotation get a little bit more rest before the end of the season. I kind of doubt the Braves do because they have an options situation on their roster, on their active roster. But the Dodgers maybe look at bringing him in to kind of limit some innings. And he's been kind of also as a retirement tour with the Dodgers, who he played with for a while. So I'd look out for them a little bit. But yeah, I'd be surprised if he pitches anything more than just like a couple of spot starts at the end of the season for somebody.
Yeah, I would. I know a certain co-host of this podcast that would be rather happy that was the case. But
yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me if they did that.
It makes some sense. And the Dodgers have been very good at reclaiming players this year. They've done a marvelous job at getting production out of a bunch of those guys. So, with that, speaking of the Dodgers, let's jump into the standings and do a quick little update for you. Because the team the Dodgers are chasing for the number 1 seed in the National League, and I think are going to lose that race, the Atlanta Braves did clinch a playoff spot this week. They will be playing in October. They have won 94 games. They are winning again tonight. They have a 238 run differential. The Atlanta Braves are the best team in baseball. It's not really close at this point, and we know you're happy about that.
Yes, I am, and they did clinch the playoff spot.
Right.
They can clinch they're playing the Phillies, who are in second place, so their magic number is 4 before tonight's game ends, which the Braves are up 6-1 right now, so you never know what happens in that ballpark, and the Phillies are pretty good, so the game's not over by any means, but if they win tonight, they could potentially clinch the division tomorrow. But yeah, 94 wins for the Braves, and it's been a really fun season for them. I've enjoyed watching them, and it just seems like every night something really cool happens for them too. They have a 20-game lead on the Marlins, who are 4 games over 500.
That's wild.
Wild.
So yeah, we've got them in. We've got the Milwaukee Brewers have a 3-game lead over the Chicago Cubs in the NL Central. It's a 7-game lead over the Reds, so it's really Brewers versus Cubs at this point for that NL Central. And remember, the last 3 games of the season between those two teams are against each other, I believe, at Milwaukee. So we
That could be
obviously the race is,
interesting.
that's going to be an interesting finish to the year, and that's coming directly after the Cubs have a series with the Braves. So either the Braves will be done, right, and maybe resting guys for the playoffs, or if it's the Braves and they're just going to play everybody. And
I was gonna say, I think that might end up being the series that week before the season ends, that the Braves give their big playoff rotation guys their last starts, so they get an extra couple days of rest.
yeah, so
But
we'll see how that one goes. We'll have to keep an eye on that race because that one is still close. Then you've got the Dodgers 12 games up over the Diamondbacks in the NL West and 13.5 up over the Giants. I would go ahead and put a fork in it. Dodgers are going to win the NL West. A quick look at the wild card standings for the National League. Phillies are the first team in the wild card right now. They are a game and a half above the Cubs as the second team with 78 wins. Arizona Diamondbacks are currently sitting in that third spot with 76 wins. Giants and Marlins are tied at a game and a half back with 74 wins. Reds have an extra loss in the bank. They're 2 full games back with 74 wins. 6 teams fighting for 3 spots. Kind of feels like 4 teams fighting for 1 spot a little bit, but if the Phillies or the Cubs go on a big slide, they could certainly fall out. There's a whole lot going on right now.
yeah, I think the Phillies and the Cubs are fairly safe right now. I think they'll probably be the 4 and 5 seed, unless one of these other teams gets really, really hot and bumps one of them to the 6th seed. But I think they're pretty safe to make the playoffs at this point, right now. I know the Cubs have a 3.5 game advantage on the over the into the wild card. So and they have a really easy schedule remaining, and the Phillies are a game and a half above the Cubs. So I think that'll end up being the 2 of the teams. But the other ones, it's a real interesting race. The Diamondbacks have been playing pretty good again lately and have kind of stabilized things. They are losing right now tonight to the Mets, but with the way the Mets are, the Diamondbacks probably come back and win. And the Marlins have been really hot in September, surprisingly, and they have a shot to maybe be the to maybe win, to maybe make it in somehow. And one little note on the Marlins is they play the Braves this weekend. It could be a hangover lineup for the Braves after clinching, so that could. Of course, the Braves have an off day on Thursday, so they might just use that as their hangover day if they can win tonight and tomorrow. But that'll be interesting to look at. And I kind of feel like the Giants are probably sliding out of the picture right now, but you never know. There's still somewhere between like 15 and 20 games for every team remaining. So you never know what might happen in these last few weeks.
No, this is coming down to crunch time. So let's jump into the AL. Baltimore Orioles are still leading the AL East by 3 games over the Tampa Bay Rays, 11.5 over the Toronto Blue Jays. Those 2 have really pulled out there, and I'm very shocked by the way the Orioles have played. They have won a lot of games, 91 wins for the Baltimore Orioles, and we're early in September still. Minnesota Twins have a 7.5 game lead over Cleveland in the AL Central. And then the AL West, which has undergone some transformations over the last couple of weeks since we last talked about them. The Mariners took the lead for a little bit, but Houston has gotten back out in front. They are 2 games up over the Rangers, 2.5 up over the Mariners. To clarify the wild card picture, the Rays are the number 1 wild card team right now. They would be pretty much locked for that if they don't catch the Orioles. And if the Orioles, if they do catch the Orioles would be the number 1 wild card team in the AL. Number 2 right now is Toronto by a half game over Texas. Texas is a half game up over Seattle. So that's a 3 teams fighting for 2 spots. Boston 6.5 out. They're probably not going to make it into the wild card at this point. It's really a battle between Toronto, Texas, and Seattle, and then also Houston. If Houston can maybe, if one of those, Texas or Seattle, can beat Houston for the AL Central or the AL West, then that would lead Houston into the wild card and leave one of them out. But somebody's missing the playoffs out of those 3 teams, and that's pretty crazy because those are 3 really good teams.
Yeah, definitely a crazy finish here in the American League. I think that I trust the Rangers and Mariners a lot more than the Blue Jays right now, but I wouldn't count out the Blue Jays. They have good pitching. I just don't have a good vibe with the Blue Jays at all. And I know they've been playing pretty well lately, but I think the Rangers have just the upside. I think Corey Seager and Marcus Semien are going to carry the Rangers over the last few weeks. I really think that they're going to end up making it in. The Mariners have been so hot in the second half, but their last 10 games they've gone 3-7. They've kind of fallen back off, and I don't really trust their offense. They were hot for a while, but I just don't. I've never trusted their offense all year. So I think the teams that are currently in are the teams you're probably going to see. I could see the Mariners passing the Blue Jays because I don't really trust either one of them. But um, I think the AL East race is going to be really interesting. I don't know if the Orioles play the Rays very much the rest of the year, but that could only
I can
take
look.
one. Could only be one series between those two teams that flips things.
There's a 4-game set between them this weekend.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So the Orioles Rays this weekend probably determines, well, at least whether the Rays have a shot. If the Orioles go out in there and win 3 out of 4, it's over. But
Right.
it'll be interesting, and that's a big deal, the Orioles Rays, because I think that the Orioles have a little bit of an advantage in a 5 or 7 game series compared to a 3-game series because the pitching. I think the Orioles have 3 or 4 number 3 starters, whereas like if they're going up against an ace, they're gonna and the number 2, they're probably not great, but they do have a little bit of depth and their bullpen is pretty good. So I think that maybe in a longer series they might be a little bit better suited for than a short series. So that could be a big deal whether or not they get that bye, because whoever loses, kind of like the NL East was last year, whoever loses that division is going to have like upwards of 95 wins and is going to have to play a 3-game series against either the Rangers or the Astros or the Mariners or I guess the Blue Jays. I guess all of them are kind of alive for that. But like you got a really good team to play, and you've beaten by like 8.5 games this year.
Yeah, that's recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Winning the division is so important. It's important for pretty much any team other than the Twins, who are locked in at third. They're going to play the 6th seed. It just is what it is. So with that, let's move to injuries before we move to call-ups. We'll do injuries first. The first bit of news, we'll start with the Dodgers, kind of go back to them. Walker Buehler out for the season. We talked about him potentially coming back, potentially getting those starts, maybe coming out of the bullpen. He is not going to come back this season. They have gone ahead and ruled him out. He's just not progressing like they want him to. And on top of that, Clayton Kershaw still dealing with some soreness. I think it's his back that's still bothering him over after being on the IL for a lot of this year. He's trying to pitch through it. It doesn't seem like a really great way to handle that, but the Dodgers don't have that many options. This is a team kind of thin on pitching. On top of that, Mookie Betts left a game this week in a walking boot. Fouled the ball off his foot, got x-rays negative. He's since homered. He's okay, but the Dodgers dealing with a lot of injuries right now.
Yeah, I mean the rotation for the Dodgers has been is going to be a problem. With Julio Urias on the administrative leave list after his domestic violence arrest and out for the year. They were kind of hoping that Buehler would come back, but that's not going to happen, which is really the wise decision for his future. I mean, you don't want to rush back from Tommy John surgery, not 100% ready to go, and try to figure out a way to pitch in the postseason. It's just, that's a tough thing to do. So I think that, especially coming off your second Tommy John surgery, which is what he'll be coming off of. I think that that's probably the wise decision, even though it does suck for him. Like, I know he probably wants to pitch in the postseason. It's just probably not the best thing. And then the Kershaw thing is difficult for me. They're trying to have him pitch through it, but he's been really bad lately. And his velocity's way down. His command's not there. Like, it is quite obvious that after watching him earlier in the season when he was healthy, how good he still is. It is quite obvious this injury is affecting him pretty heavily. So, I mean, I wouldn't pitch him I'd put him on the 10-day IL if I were them and let him sit for 10 days, come back and make a start before the postseason to kind of get back in a rhythm, and then hope he might be a little bit fresher, because right now the way he's pitching right now is not going to work. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But with those three guys out, I mean, who are we looking at? Is there? I mean, Gonsolin's out for the Bobby
Gotham's
Miller's
gone.
their best pitcher.
Yep.
I mean, he's their best guy, and then they're gonna have to
So
give
Lance Lynn.
Lance Lynn has been horrible. So
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's gonna be. I mean, Bobby Miller's been really good. You never know how a rookie is gonna respond in the postseason, but he's been really good. So I think Bobby Miller is probably someone they trust. But beyond him, Lance Lynn is probably starting game 2 of a postseason series at this point, unless Kershaw. I mean, Kershaw probably will be, but Kershaw probably will be starting it, but he's not healthy. So I mean, it's going to be injured Kershaw, Lance Lynn, and Bobby Miller, who's a rookie, but I think Bobby Miller's the best out of the three right now. And then who knows what their other spot would be? It's be like, I guess, Emmett Sheehan or Gavin Stone or somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, their rotation is a mess. I know they have a great offense with Betts and Freeman. Betts came back, I think, last night and homered, so I think he's all right. They'll probably rest him a little bit more as the season finishes out. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in this, with that rotation coming down the stretch and in the postseason.
Well, I'm going to mix it in anyway. They also called up Kyle Hurt, who's going to be a reliever, but he's got really, really nasty stuff. One of those kind of Dodgers pitching lab guys, Kyle Hurt. So I do wonder if the Dodgers might think about maybe trying to keep bringing guys up, right? I mean, this is going to be their recipe to get some pitching, is to bring guys up. Maybe Nick Frasso comes up. But ultimately, it does look really bad that they ended up not getting Eduardo Rodriguez. That was pretty clearly their goal.
Yeah.
Going into the trade deadline, and obviously that getting nixed by Eduardo Rodriguez himself really hurts the Dodgers.
Yeah, it really does.
Let's cut forward. The Braves did have Colin McHugh and Mike Soroka on the IL. I don't think it's going to matter much, but the Braves do, I think Kyle Wright's still on the IL too, if I'm not mistaken.
He came back last night.
Yeah, okay, so there you go.
He did
also
not
Kyle
pitch
Wright's
well,
back.
but it was his first start back, so who knows? But
yeah, if the Braves can get Kyle Wright going, right, Charlie Morton will make some postseason starts. Max Fried's looking really, really good right now. I think the Braves are going to be fine, having not really gotten the full Soroka experience back, and maybe they can get him healthy this offseason.
Yeah, I don't know. So the thing about Soroka is that sucks is that they lost the year of control with that move, and he's out of options, so they can't send him back to the minor leagues since he's on the IL, and there's a pretty good chance he gets non-tendered this offseason because of that, and McHugh just hasn't been good at all year. I think this is honestly kind of a phantom IL stint for him, but unfortunate, but you hate to see it for Soroka.
Absolutely. Let's jump to the Miami Marlins, stay in the NL East. Jorge Soler to the IL, Sandy Alcantara to the IL. In spite of this, the Marlins have won a bunch of games, but two of their best players out probably for the rest of the season. It is the 10-day IL, but I think if either one of them comes back, I'll be surprised. I have to double check what they're looking at, but yeah,
I think Alcantara is pretty much done. I think he has like a flexor tendon strain or something.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But Soler, I don't even know what his injury is. So
I am trying to double check.
But that's a big deal for them because I mean they really don't have a lot of power in their lineup. Luckily for them, oblique, yeah, that's really not good. So. They don't have a lot of power in their lineup. They brought in Jake Berger at the deadline, luckily that has added some power, but Soler is their power guy. So that's unfortunate for them and really hurts their chances, but you never know. I mean, all you have to do is play a good baseball for 2 weeks and you sneak in. So maybe they still make it in, but it's going to make it a lot tougher.
It is. It puts them on the back burner. Another playoff team potential playoff team dealing with injury. Jose Siri out with a broken hand for the Tampa Bay Rays. He's been their center fielder all year. I want to double check before I misquote, but I want to say Jose Siri's been very, very good.
Yeah, he has
for the Rays.
He's got
25 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 105 WRC plus.
He's been an elite center fielder defensively too. He's put up almost 3 WAR. He's been an impact player for them this year, so that's a big deal for them to lose him. But The thing about the Rays is that they do have a lot of depth, and it's not like losing. If they lost Yandy Diaz or Isaac Paredes or Brandon Lau or somebody, or maybe another pitcher, it probably would be a bigger deal. But that still really hurts the Rays to lose Jose Siri because he's been solid this year.
It's worth noting he's got a 36% strikeout rate and a 5% walk rate. This is a explosive type of player, right? Guy swinging for the fences all the time, everything else be damned.
He seems to be similar to Adolis Garcia when he first kind of broke onto the scene.
Yeah, he might be even like more athletic than Garcia was. Garcia hasn't been able to
probably
stick
faster.
in center. Yeah, so with that, another playoff team dealing with issues. The Chicago Cubs have put Albert Alzolay, their closer, and Jeimer Candelario, their trade acquisition third baseman, on the IL. Alzolay's is a forearm, and Candelario is back strain. Hopefully both can get back before the playoffs start, but a tough break. Cubs yesterday used Michael Fulmer to close the game against the Rockies.
Yikes.
It was exactly yikes, but they did win. I think Julian Merryweather's going to step into the closer's role for the Cubs. He pitched 3 days in a row before that, which is why he didn't pitch yesterday. But Julian Merryweather's been absolutely incredible. Albert Alzolay had been incredible too all season. He blew 2 saves 2 weeks ago. They finally IL'd him because I think his forearm had started not feeling right then. And Pete Crow Armstrong just made an incredible catch on the track. My goodness, he's been playing for an inning. So the Cubs bullpen situation is going to be, I think, pretty nerve-wracking for Cubs fans going down the stretch. Losing your closer is never good. But Julian Merryweather's going to be able to anchor it. He's been a huge reclamation signing for the Cubs. Got DFA'd by the Blue Jays. But he's a guy who throws 100 miles an hour with a hammer slider. And, he's really effective. He doesn't walk a whole lot of guys. I think that's a guy that a lot of teams missed on, and I was really excited when the Cubs picked him up, and he's been really, really good. They've been able to work with him and get the good player that kind of always seemed to be in there out of him. So, Alzolay being down, not great, but I think there will be some ability for the Cubs to overcome that. Candelario is a little less easy to overcome, but I'll tell you the weird thing that's been happening is that Nick Madrigal's been playing really good third base defense for the Cubs. Like, as good as Manny Machado in half the innings defense at third base. It is crazy. So, they're going to just put Madrigal there, I guess. He's not hitting well, but dang it, he can play some third base, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know with Alzolay, that's a big loss for the Cubs, and I don't know about like when there's a forearm strain, you don't mess with that. So
right.
I don't know what his timetable will look like, and Candelario with it being a back thing, hopefully he's able to come back. But you mentioned Nick Madrigal's defense. I saw an article about that sometime earlier in the season where he was basically like, the way that he was making up for the fact that he has a noodle arm is that he basically, every time he gets the ball, just sprints toward first base and to make the throw, which is kind of funny, but it's worked for him. So, definitely worked for him. But yeah, I mean, those are pretty big deal for the Cubs. The Cubs pitching is, outside of Justin Steele, there's some big time question marks with their pitching right now, and luckily for them, they've got a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. But they might be able to, that they'll probably still be fine, but that it's going to be tough in the postseason for that pitching to hold up.
Yeah, the good news for the Cubs is that Jordan Wicks has come up and been very, very good, and the Cubs have a lot of guys who get ground balls. Kyle Hendricks, Wicks has done exactly that. Javier Assad's done that. They just pitch to the strengths of this team, which is that middle infield defense with Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner, and it's working. So, as long as these guys can keep generating those ground balls, keep generating soft contact, I think they'll be all right. You can't really rely on that in the playoffs, though. You need swing and miss, and the Cubs don't have that, so they'll just have to see what happens. But that'll be I think an area to add this offseason for the Cubs will be swing and miss pitchers. Moving to some other big names that went down. Jason Dominguez tore his UCL. He had hit 4 home runs in like 10 games with the Yankees. We had discussed him coming up already torn UCL. He'll be down till at least halfway through next year. Really good debut for Jason Dominguez, but now he's got to, get Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, that really sucks for him. He had done really well since coming up. Had a 161 WRC plus. Of course, the 4 home runs in 8 games plays a part of that. That's kind of an unsustainable clip, but he had been holding his own with his plate discipline. His walk rate was pretty low compared to his minor league numbers, but he wasn't striking out an absolute ton in his first 33 plate appearances. So it sucked to see him get hurt. The big thing with this is obviously with him not being a pitcher, it's not quite as big of a deal with the Tommy John surgery, but the timetable on getting him back next year, and then how well he's able to play in the outfield with his arm is probably a pretty big deal. Going forward, this is a guy who you're looking at probably being a corner outfielder in the future. And if his arm, isn't as good, then that could really affect his defensive value in the future. So we'll see what happens there, but we'll look forward to seeing him, again next year, later in the season. And obviously, we've seen that torn UCL doesn't really affect hitters that much at the plate. So, we've seen it with Bryce Harper this year coming back. We saw it with Ohtani when he hit that season with the torn UCL, and probably will, and he already has been some this year before the oblique issue, and and then he'll probably do the same next year, is hit with after having at least some kind of elbow procedure. They haven't announced for sure yet if it's going to be Tommy John, but yeah, we'll see what happens with Dominguez. It's definitely a promising start for him though, and maybe next year he'll be able to build off of it.
Yep. Final bit of injuries here. Andrew McCutchen down for the rest of the season. Something in his foot. Broken bone in his foot, I believe. And then O'Neal Cruz is not coming back for the Pirates. So a couple of big losses there, though that is a team that has kind of long fallen out of the race despite having a good start. But hopefully that's not it for McCutchen, and he goes into this offseason and ends up with a free agent deal somewhere, because he's a great dude to have, and he had a really good season in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think McCutchen will probably play again next year if I had to guess. And I think he likes playing back in Pittsburgh, and he had, like you said, he had a good year, and he'll help them. And you never know with Pittsburgh; they could start to figure it out again. They've got some young talent, and they've still got pretty good farm system players. I don't think they have the upside of their farm system that like the Orioles have had, or the Reds have now, or some of those types of teams. But they've still got some pretty good prospects down there, and we'll see if they actually supplement it with enough at the big league level with, trades, free agency, that kind of thing to actually be good. But, it'd be fun to see Andrew McCutchen play for a decent Pirates team again. Mm-hmm. And it sucks to see O'Neal Cruz, anytime he's not on the field is a bummer because he's so fascinating as a player. But it's probably the smart decision. He hasn't played basically all year. And he's a young guy. You probably don't want to bring him back in just to, play for a week and not really, be in a rhythm and stuff. You probably just want him to kind of hit the reset button and get started next year, get ready for next year. Yep. So I don't blame him for that one, even if he is healthy. I don't know if he's going to be healthy enough to come back and play, but even if he is, I think it's probably wise just to wait till next year.
Yep, I think you're right. Let's jump to the last 2 call-ups that we have before we do Players of the Week and send you guys off. Number 1, we'll start with Jordan Lawler, called up by the Diamondbacks. He has not been good so far. He has struggled at striking out in 50% of his plate appearances, but the Diamondbacks were in need of a shortstop. They non-tendered Nick Ahmed, looking for a bit of a spark there from Lawler. He got a hit in his first game, but hasn't done much since.
Yeah, of course it's 8 games, so with Jordan Lawler, you just don't know for sure, what's going on. If it might just be small sample size, there might be some real issues there. I know that a lot of prospect evaluators have been a little bit lower on him at the plate with his hit tool. So the 50% strikeout rate in his first 30-ish plate appearances is definitely not, it's definitely not a great sign, but. I don't think that was necessarily a big problem in the minor leagues, but I think there's some thoughts that his swing might end up being one of those that doesn't translate fantastic. But with his, his versatility as a player and all the things he can do, I think he'll end up being a good big leaguer. And so that one's one that, you would hope that he is able to I hope that he's able to kind of figure it out and help them. I mean, they need the help. They're right in the thick of the race, as we were talking about earlier. So
Yeah, Nick Ahmed, very emotional. He spent his whole career in Arizona, and to kind of get unceremoniously kicked right as the season's winding down for a
yeah,
rookie definitely doesn't feel good on his end. But I think he'll latch on as a bench player. He's a good glove at shortstop.
Yep.
So the last call up we have was Pete Crow Armstrong. I mentioned it already because he ran down a ball that was hit 107 off the bat in Coors Field at the wall. Uh, Pete Crow Armstrong's an 80 grade defender, man. It's going to be really fun watching him play out there. He tried to steal a base last night, wound up getting thrown out, laid down a sac bunt. He's going to get his first plate appearance here in a little bit. I think it's a great move for the Cubs, and I really think they need to be playing him as much as humanly possible because that's a dude that could really change your fortunes up the middle if you're playing, another really good defender in the outfield, to kind of pair with Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner. It's just having that middle infield defense so valuable. I think he could be really impactful as a fielder specifically. Even if he doesn't hit anything, that could be huge.
yeah, for sure. That defense for him is going to be his calling card. I think he's got some upside at the plate too, but the defense is insane for him, and he could be one of those guys that ends up being like an all-star caliber player, even if he has like a league average stat line at the plate. So
Yep.
he's going to be really good. He could, and he's got more upside than that. But he could be Kevin Kiermaier, where he's just kind of an average hitter, but so good defensively. He could be like a 4 or 5 win player. He's that good.
What always is going to worry me until we get to see him, a lot is, is this a guy like Christian Pache who has some big swing holes that just can't be fixed, right? Or Victor Robles, those are the types of guys who've come up who've had this similar profile that, just end up not being the level of player we were really hoping them to be. I think Pete Crow Armstrong has more power than those guys, and I think that can carry him along. Similar to a Jose Siri, right? Even if he hits 220, as long as you're hitting 25 home runs, you're fine. So, playing that kind of defense. So I think we're going to see somebody special here in Chicago. With that, Matt, who's your player of the week? So we can stop talking about the Cubs for a second.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk. I hate to say it, but we're going to talk about the Braves again.
Oh no!
Because, yeah, but and I don't, obviously I don't want to talk about the Braves every single time, but I mean Matt Olson this week.
Yeah, this might be the best week I've seen.
Over the past week, he's hit 517. This is before tonight. He hit 517 with a 611 on base, a 1.207 slugging. He hit 6 home runs in 8 games over the past week before tonight.
Which he homered in.
Which he's 2 for 3 with a homer and a walk tonight. He put up 1.2 WAR over the past week, which his defensive value was almost -1. I mean, it was all offense. A 361 WRC plus. I mean, this guy is like, he's crazy. And tonight, the home run he hit tied the Braves franchise record with his 51st home run of the season. So the next one will break the record. And at this point, he has put up 6 WAR on the season
as a first baseman.
As a first baseman, he's got a 163 WRC plus.
I mean, as a Freddie Freeman first baseman who's a good defender.
Right. He's a very meh defender at first base.
Right.
If that.
So, that's Matt Olson is the dude, and he's he's the kind of guy who would be an MVP favorite were Ronald Acuna, Freddie Freeman, and Mookie Betts not doing unbelievable stuff. Yeah. So, I think he's going to get votes, right? There's going to be somebody who goes, well, this guy hit 50 something home runs. He's got to be the MVP, right? It's not gonna win him the MVP, but he's certainly deserving of a case and a consideration. Yeah. Takes me back to the All-Star break when I gave him best hitter. So that was good.
Go.
The guy I'm going to choose for player of the week was a guy who had 5 home runs in the last week, including a game-tying home run last night that wound up not being enough for the Seattle Mariners. That was Julio Rodriguez. We've talked about it a number of times. He started off really slow this season. This week, Julio Rodriguez, 5 homers, 8 RBIs, 344 batting average, 844 slug. With good center field defense. This is a guy who, we've talked about that he needs to be the superstar for Seattle to make the playoffs, to be able to go far. His recent hot streak has gotten him to a 30-30 season. With 30 homers, 36 stolen bases. He's at a 134 WRC plus. Last year he was at 146 WRC plus. Last year he had 5.4 wins above replacement. This year he's at 5.9. He's going to pass 6. So he's actually been better this year than he was last year, when he was, an MVP candidate and a really good player. And Pete Armstrong just had an RBI ground fielder's choice to kick off his career there.
Yeah, he's just been Julio Rodriguez has just been out of his mind since the All-Star break, and he's the reason that the like I talked about earlier. Just I don't trust the Mariners' offense. It's because Julio Rodriguez is the only guy. He is the Mariners' offense, with the exception of like an occasional homer from like Kyle Raleigh or Eugenio Suarez. Like he is their offense. So he has had to hit at this clip for this much of the season for them to be in the race, and the fact that he's done that after struggling for the first month or so has been unbelievable. So that's definitely a great pick this week.
You also look at his actual slash numbers. 287 batting average this year. It was 284 last year. 342 on base this year. It was 345 last year. 504 slug this year. It was 509 last year. He's the same player. Which is crazy, but he's also driven in a lot more runs. He's been more of a middle of the order type of producer. He's going to get to 100 RBI. He's probably going to get to 100 runs. He might get to 40 steals, right? Like, this is a very, very productive 5-tool player, a superstar in Seattle. Good for them to have another one. It's been a while since they've had a superstar center fielder, but they had one a few years ago. I don't know if you remember that guy.
Yeah.
Ken Griffey Jr. That was the one I was going for. Ichiro played right field. That, I think we're good. I think that's just about it.
I got one other note, and it's a note that I don't think very many people expected to hear this year. The A's are not the worst team in baseball.
Oh my goodness, are you serious? They have won
6 of their past 10. They have passed the Kansas City Royals in the standings.
Wow.
By a game and a half.
I can't believe that. I can't believe the Royals are that bad, with Bobby Witt being as good as he has, man.
Yep.
It's just crazy.
They're pretty bad. And
Cole Reagans. And
I believe that the A's are beating the Astros by 3 runs right now, which probably won't last because the A's pitching is so bad. But last I saw, it was a 3-run game, and it is still a 3-run game, 4-1. So,
dang.
Pretty wild.
Well, what an end to this was the A's coming out of last place. They're on the rise.
Yep.
Next year, World Series winners, Oakland A's.
Fly the banner in Vegas.
All right, with that, this has been the Bat Flip Podcast. I'm David. That was Matt. We will see you guys next week with Damian back. Have a good week.